All right, so welcome to CE 529, graduate class in modeling and transportation. And what we are doing is trying to model the system so that we can observe the behavior of the system under certain stimulus. Okay? So prerequisite is CE 321. I hope everybody's in the right class. By the way, I should have said that before. I'm Anurag Pandey, in case you don't know me. I haven't taught the CE 321 class in a while. So it looks like you might not have seen me in classes before, but I know some of you from ITE and from some other graduate classes that I've taught recently. So I'm very much looking forward to this in-person class, but I'm providing the recording so that we have a record and we can refer back to things and so on and so forth. Okay, my office is located in building 13-12, and that's where the civil engineering office is. Feel free to locate the office. I have my phone number and my email address listed there. I mean, I've left the phone number there just because I've always had it. There's no point in contacting me via that phone, because that light will keep blinking with a voicemail and I'll never check it. And ultimately they will get deleted because I'll have too many messages. So don't worry about leaving a voicemail or anything on my office phone. If you need to reach me, the best way is to email. And even that's not a very good way because I fall behind on emails. But one good way to reach me is, sorry about that. That's just, I'm telling you the truth here. So the best way to reach me is what I have here. Obviously, stop by during office hours. We'll do office hours virtually, right? So because I think they work really well, because the virtual office hours work really well because I can answer any questions that you might have. We can share a screen. We can do all sorts of things. And then if there are things that I think that might be useful to you later on, I can just quickly record some things and make it available to you as well as to the other students. So I found that virtual office hours really work well. So we'll stick with that. But that does not mean that you cannot come and see me. Just let me know that you need to see me in person and we can figure it out. And then coming back to the best way to reach me is that if you need to reach me outside of the office hours, there is a link here that you can make an appointment with. So feel free to reach out on that Calendly link and you can make a 30-minute appointment. It doesn't have to take 30 minutes. It's just the default there. But that's when something is on my calendar, yeah, I'm slave to that. Like once you put something on my calendar, I will invariably show up. So and then if it needs to be an in-person meeting, just indicate that. And I'm happy to meet in person as well. So it's not a big deal. And then one more thing about sort of these in-person and virtual and all that, I'm going to keep the mask on, not because I'm at risk or I live with somebody who's at risk necessarily for COVID, but I just haven't had a cold in 2 years. I'm loving that. I don't remember any 2-year stretch in my life when I did not have a cold other than these last 2 years. I like to keep it that way. And it's up to you, whatever you want with the mask, that's up to you. But I'm going to keep the mask on. I think we have a small enough class and I know my voice will carry. So we should be good there. Okay. So any questions so far about just the big picture class, what the class is about, or how sort of our interactions are going to work outside of the classroom, and any questions on those so far? All right, that's great. So getting prepared, see, that's the thing. I have PolyLearn there, so that's what tells you that I haven't taught this class in 3 years also. So I'm going to change that. And then that's another thing on your Canvas page. What I've done is this class, I don't actually provide PDF of the syllabus. Right? I just provide a Google Doc, and why I do that is precisely because of this. Yeah, right. So I'm not going to make the same mistake next year. Okay, so check Canvas for assignments, lecture notes, homework problems. There you go. All right, so just keep checking your Canvas as often as possible. And the good thing about this class is that we meet a lot in this class. So we meet Tuesday, Thursday for the lecture, and then we meet the same days. So 12 to 3 for the lab. So I'm gonna keep reminding you to check your Canvas page often and always. So So that should be good. It's my office and scheduled office hours. And then we'll talk about the classroom civility, academic honesty, appropriate use of email and office hours in a little bit. And then the last thing is the class simulcast. So we're going to do this class online as well. So as you said, like, you can join the class from online if you're feeling sick, or if you're not feeling too well, it's okay. And then you can type up your questions in chat and so forth and interact with the class that way. But again, don't consider that as a substitute for lectures or lab, because I don't think I'll be able to provide the same kind of experience. It's just it's a decent backup plan is what it is. Okay, so use that as a backup plan. So no required textbook in the class, so you don't have to buy any textbooks. I'm a big believer of not having students buy textbooks. This is where our goal of, all right, so something, okay, all right, so that's why it doesn't work, right? So that's why it's not a good substitute. I'm not going to repeat what I said. We'll just assume that you can just read the syllabus. Okay. But if I can assume you can just read the syllabus, what am I doing here today? Right? But we'll not ask these hard questions, and we'll just go on with what we can do. All right. So again, so make sure that you are participating in the class. Make sure that you are checking your Canvas page. Make sure that you're using the online link for the class meeting only sort of as a backup plan, and not using that as a substitute for the class. All right. So, and then I already talked about the office hours. So here is your grading. Your lab assignments and your homework are going to count for like half the grade. And that's a good thing, right? Because to me, the grade that you get in the class is almost, I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's not something. So grade is a very extraneous thing that I have to do, because I have to do assessments and I have to submit the grade. But I'm a big believer in grades ultimately being completely immaterial to what happens, like, what happens in your careers and so forth. Nobody asks for your grade, nobody, and I'm in academia, nobody asks for my grades. Once you get into grad school, or once you get a job, nobody cares about your grad school and about your grades and so forth. To the extent that grade matter is, are you able to learn the material? So if you're able to learn the material, it doesn't matter if you got an A- or a B+ or A. I'm saying that because I don't want to receive any emails about the grades after the course. That's one thing. That's one reason why I'm saying that. But the other reason I'm saying that, it's true, right? So it is true, because really you can talk to any people that you're close to who are already working in the industry, who might be recent graduate. I know some of you, a lot of you are ITE members. So talk to some folks that you might be close who recently graduated. Ask them what they think of the importance of grade versus being able to do things and being able to learn things. So invariably, the answer that you will get from everybody is that grades don't really matter. If I'm able to learn the material, if I'm gonna, and so just, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Like, yeah, I'm gonna break down the grades for you so that you can see what is the most important thing in the class is. So your lab assignments and your homework are very important, because those things are the things that you're going to learn a lot from. You're going to spend considerable time on those. You are going to interact with each other a lot on that. You're going to interact with me. You're going to interact with something that's written material, and you're going to try to understand what's going on. So there is a lot of practice that will happen because of that. That's why this is exactly half the grade for the class. Okay. And then I have tests, including final and midterm, just for your assessment. That's about 40%. And the way I do final and midterm is that we're going to do one midterm in week 5, and then we're going to do one midterm in week 10, which is not exactly a midterm, but whatever. So those are going to be 20% each. And if you do well on those, you can skip the final. You don't have to worry about the final, because if you do well on those, and kind of what I'm trying to get at when I say that grade is not that important to me. So, I mean, if you can make up the grade, that's fine. If you can, so yeah, so just make sure that, I want to give you the good grade, right? So if you do well in the test, then you don't have to worry about the final. I don't care. And then, but if you want to make up, if you really want the grade, okay, I'll give you another chance. I don't care. So that's fine too. Okay. So just, that's about 40%. And then participation is 10%. So just overall showing up, submitting all your homeworks on time, and then making up, and like if you're missing some things, communicating with your group on time and all of that, that shows up as your grade. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm curious, let's say we're sitting at like an 85% and we decide not to take the final, that's what you give us?
So the question is, so I'm going to just repeat the question. So the question is, if you get 85%, so, so yeah, see, if I account for the 20%, right? So it's 20% for each homework, right? So if you don't show up to the final, I'll give you a 0 for the final, but then it'll be the best of whether what you got in the final versus what you got on average on 2 midterms.
Okay.
Right? So the way the grading will work is each of the midterm will have a 20% weight, and I'll average the 2 midterms, and then I'll look at your final exam grade, whichever is the higher one, I'll just use that. If you don't show up for the final, you get a 0 for the final, but obviously your midterm grade is high enough that you could use that. And again, what I'm trying to tell you is that if you think that you can go from an A- to an A with that final, if it were up to me, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't bother, right? Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're getting A- or an A. Because if you understood the material, if you spend the time learning the material, then you are in good shape either way, whether it's A- or an A. But I'm not going to stop you. You have the option of trying to go from an A- to an A. But again, we tend to make, as when we were students, when all of us are when we are students, we tend to take grades too seriously, because that's how things are when you're in high school. Yeah, you want to get good grades so you can get to Cal Poly or wherever. But then, as you sort of move forward in your career, grades become less and less important. And I think at this point, your last quarter, last semester, or maybe second to last, or third to last semester or quarter, it doesn't matter. It's fine. So that's sort of is the big picture here. Item here is that you don't have to worry about necessarily what grade you're going to get. But that's not to say that it's going to be easy, right? So if you don't have to worry about the grade, that almost makes it harder, because sometimes grading is something that you can game, right? Grading is a system that you can game. But now, if it's not about the grading, if it's about learning, then you have to put in more time. So that's what I'm trying to get at, is that if you're going to try to get a satisfactory performance in the class, it will require an average of 6 to 7 hours per week in addition to your in-class lectures and labs. So I'm thinking, like, because it's a 5-unit class, usually that translates to about 10 hours of studying outside of the class. Right? Is a 5-unit class for you? No, it's a 4-unit class. 4-unit class. So yeah, that requires about 8 hours. But I'm going to mark it down a little bit less than 8 hours, because those 3-hour labs actually give you a lot of good time to work on things, clarify doubts on homework and stuff like that. So you can actually bring down that time a little bit. So I'm thinking like probably 6 to 7 hours per week would be enough outside of the class. So, and maybe, if you utilize your time efficiently in the labs and in the class, I think it might even be a little bit less than that. So you can get by with a little bit lower time spent outside. And then that's the other thing. Like if you are seeing during the quarter that the time that you're spending outside of the class, and it's more than 6-7 hours, any week that happens, you should let me know as soon as possible, because something's not working right, because the class is not designed to be more than that much work. It's just not designed to be. So it could be that, you're probably doing too much work in your group, or you're not studying right. You're probably spending too much time. So we have to figure out what the problem is then in that case. So don't try to put it off. Like if you're feeling that it's becoming too burdensome, reach out to me. Let's figure out what's going on. Let's sort out what is happening. Okay, for your homework, yeah, make sure that you're producing good quality work that somebody can understand. I'm hoping that I'll have a grader, but this class is a very hard to find grader for, because whoever takes this class basically gets a job like right next quarter. So they don't come back. So, and most people graduate, right? This is a 500 level class. Anytime you take this class, it's almost impossible that you're going to be around next spring as well. So that rarely happens. Although it could happen with some people, but it's rare. So I don't usually have a grader for this class. So I'm the person who's grading, and I got to tell you, I'm just swamped. So I need to be able to have your material that I can easily understand, and I don't want to spend too much time on trying to understand what you did. I'm happy to talk with you. I'm happy to explain things to you, but spending time on trying to understand what you write is just a crazy waste of time for everybody. So make sure that you're submitting something that's clearly written. It's okay to make mistakes. That's what the class is for, right? And that's all good. And that's perfectly fine to make mistakes and having errors. Although it does save me time if you don't make any errors, because then I'm done like very quickly with the grading. But it's okay to make mistakes. I'll tolerate the mistakes. I don't care for not having clearly written work, right? So make sure that doesn't happen. And then in-class tests, there would be 2 midterm tests, as I said, and then obviously a final if you need to take one. And we'll try to have those in class. Is my plan, is to at least we'll see. Like first midterm we'll definitely have it in class. We'll see how that goes, and then yeah. So the plan is for the test to be in class, and then we'll see. About the final. There's a chance that I could create an experience where we can have sort of online final, but we'll see about that. But at least prepare for the 2 in-class midterm tests. That optional final could potentially be done online. So we'll see about that. I don't have any travel dates as of right now, but I might have some traveling to do during the quarter, and I'll let you know. And then that's the good thing about having sort of this online option, right? So we can switch back to online, and even the college allows us to do 25% of the class sort of online whenever we choose. So I think that's probably a good thing. And in case we do have some travel, I'll make sure that we have some alternative arrangements there. Okay, so yeah, this is about the assessment of performance. So letter grade A, and then A- and B+ and all that. So as long as you're learning the material, there's not a big difference between A- and A or a B+. They're all sort of in the same category. My experience in the past has been that most people, because this material is also somewhat interesting, because in your undergraduate career, when you're starting out and you haven't figured out what you're going to do, you sometimes end up in classes that you have not a lot of interest in, and then you try to just sort of get by. And then that's where your grade sort of suffers too, right? When you're not paying too much attention, whatever, and you have other classes that you're more interested in, or you have other things going on. But by the time you reach in this stage of the career, you probably know what you want to do. And if you're in the transportation class, you want to do a career in transportation. Of course, not everybody. Right? You have construction, which is okay. We don't discriminate based on that. But most people here are interested in transportation, so they pay attention to what's going on. And my understanding is that most people will end up anywhere between a B and an A- as their grade. Some people will end up with an A, but that's just the range of grade that you get in this class is like B to an A-, because most people want to learn what's going on because it's really interesting material to them. And they also, they're also sort of ready to work on that stuff, right? So it's very, very interesting to them. So that's just the grade distribution. So let me put it this way: I get a little bit more A's than B-. So even the bulk of the class will end up between A- and B, right? So, but I always end up with like a little bit more A's than B-, or lower. So most people do just fine. So it's a difficult class in terms of like the time that you have to put in and the things that you have to do. But once you learn that stuff and you pay attention to that stuff, you should not have issues with the grade. And we talked about the email is the best. It's the best, but even if that's not a good way, but sometimes things could be best, but still not be very good. So that's just the way of reaching me by email. But schedule a time to meet with me if you have any questions. And then we meet like twice a week for like 3, 6, 8 hours. So I think you probably will find time to interact with me, no problem. But again, feel free to reach out. Never think that you cannot reach out to me with any questions that you might have. So always reach out with any sort of questions you might have. And that Calendly appointment that I talked about is really good. You know, if something shows up on my calendar, as I said, I will show up. Okay. So that gets me to cheating. I don't know why that gets me to cheating, but that's just the way things are written up here. But maybe I should put cheating with the grade. That would be a good thing. So obviously, it's a privilege to be attending Cal Poly. You know, we're becoming more and more selective institutions in the past years. So you know there were a lot of people who wanted to come to Cal Poly but couldn't. So having that privilege here is to learn the material. We're here to learn the material. And as I said, cheating sometimes could be a way to game the system in terms of like, you know, to demonstrate what you've learned. But if you haven't learned the material, the class is not going to be very helpful to you. So your goal here should be to learn the material. And believe me, it's having taught for like this is my 14th year teaching. So having taught for that long, I can tell when folks are trying to cheat with stuff. And here is the deal. For 50% of the grade, like your homework and assignments, I don't even mind if you talk to each other, if you try to learn from each other. That's a perfectly acceptable way of working on your homework and assignments. So talking to each other, anything that comes up and talking to me, all those things are perfectly fine as you're trying to submit your assignment. I think the problem comes with, at least that's been my experience. I haven't collected any sort of formal data on it, but my experience has been that folks tend to cheat when they sort of are running out of time and they haven't put in the time and now they have to submit the homework. So I would say that if you're running into that situation, first of all, you should try not to have that situation come up more often than not. So it should not happen. You should try to manage your time in a way that you're not sort of always running into that situation where you're running out of time. If that is happening, again, it's an issue that we need to work out in some way. So maybe talk to me and figure out why is that keep happening. So that's one thing to avoid that. But if it does happen sometimes, it's okay to submit something late. Just let me know that, you know, there are some things I will be able to extend easily. Like, for example, if I know that I'm not going to be able to grade this item until a little bit later. So it's okay if you can put in some little bit more time and then you can submit it. So that's perfectly acceptable way to go. If it happens once in a while, right? If it keeps happening, then we probably have a problem, and then that might affect your participation grade, and that would be an issue. But I'm thinking if it happens once in a while, the best way is ask for an extension. And then once you ask for an extension, you know, then we can, you know, then we can figure out what's going on. Like, you know, we need to once in a while asking for extension is okay. You know, we'll try to be flexible in that regard. There is no makeup test though, unless there are well-documented emergencies. So make sure that you are planning to be here week 5, week 10, and then, but unless you have like a documented emergency, or you're traveling for some Cal Poly sports or something, or if you know right now that you need to do something during that time and you want to make arrangements for that, we can do that too. So just make sure that, you know, you are making those arrangements with me right away. And then don't try to wait for the last minute to submit things also, because once you make that into a habit, that becomes a problem, right? That's a problem, because sometimes the technical difficulties arise when you're trying to submit right at the deadline. So try to see if you can get things done before the deadline, a little bit before the deadline. that you're not always running into like mad panic of some website being down or internet connection going out or whatever, things like that. Okay, so I guess I need to change some things here. So I'll make sure I do that. And then turn your cell phone off or silent mode in the class. I mean, yeah, try not to disturb the class. That's just the basic respect for everybody who's involved here. So I would appreciate that very much. So next thing I want to do is I want to talk about all the course outline here in the next 10, 15 minutes or so. But before that, are there any questions about the working of the class, how we're going to go about doing things, so on and so forth? Any questions? Okay. Yeah, again, feel free to ask questions. I think that was one thing that I noticed when we were doing Zoom classes. I was getting more questions because folks will just type up the questions in chat. So I don't know if that's the case here. If you guys, folks are just shy about asking questions, you feel free to sort of join the class via Zoom and just sort of maybe type your questions in chat. I'm fine with that. Okay. So yeah, so that's good that if you don't have any questions, let me do this. Let me pause the recording for a minute. Okay. So the late credit is only provided if you reach out to me before the deadline and let me know that you might be a little bit late. In most cases, as I said, I will approve the extension. So don't have to worry about it. So take your time in learning the material and submitting it right. But just let me know. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is just go over all the topics. So we want to talk about introduction to simulation. Introduction to simulation is what are we doing in the class? And we're going to probably get started on that in today's lab. But this is talking about what simulation is. What are some of the important things when we are trying to look at modeling the transportation system in a simulation environment? Okay, so that's one thing. And then, so that's how we'll start. And we'll get started on that in the lab today. And then we'll talk about the traffic assignment, because in simulation modeling, anytime you're modeling the transportation system, it's very important for us to know who's going to use what route. Okay, so working knowledge of traffic assignment is very critical for us to be able to model transportation systems, because the performance of the transportation systems depend very much on the travel demand. Right? So the more demand we have, the more chances of the system sort of deteriorating to a level where it doesn't work anymore. So you get the queues and the congestion, and there are too many cars trying to pass through. And learning about traffic assignment is sort of critical. And then we'll talk about how we'll pick up some discussion from 321 here when we talk about system optimal and user equilibrium assignment. And that will mostly be what we call a static assignment model. Okay? And then we'll talk about the dynamic assignment model. Now, the 10-week class will not allow us to actually do dynamic assignment in a simulation environment. Our student version probably does not even allow us to do that. And in most cases, static assignment, most applications that you might encounter in practice, static assignment might actually be acceptable way to do things. But having some knowledge of under what circumstances might you need dynamic assignment. So we'll talk about how we need to do time-dependent traffic assignment. So that's sort of what we'll cover in week 3. And then we'll move on to the microscopic modeling of car following model and how that relates with the macro picture of the transportation system. So here, the things we might be interested in, because the simulation that we're going to learn in this class is mostly going to be micro level, microscopic simulation, where we're going to learn about how vehicles interact with each other and how their behavior with each other sort of gives rise to the overall metrics of congestion, overall metrics of even safety, or how that gives rise to what travel time you might have from point A to point B. and then at different demand levels and so on and so forth. How vehicles interact with each other, or how road users interact with each other, is a very important part of what we're going to learn, right? So now it's very important for us to understand how that micro level behavior translates to macro level parameters. How that micro level interactions between individual users then leads to the macro level picture of the transportation system on a freeway, for example, right? So if you talk about a freeway traffic flow, how the car follower or how the car following model works is, if you're a follower ahead of a lead car or behind a lead car, if you have a very big distance between yourself and that lead car, then you're not really worried about whether that car is braking or not braking. But if the gap is very low, then you're really worried about if that person is going to brake, you want to be able to brake right along with them, right? So that behavior gives rise to what we call, when we describe those macro level models. If you remember the macro level models that we used to cover in CE 321, when we used to say how this model here, we used to have flow and density. Remember, we used to have these flow and density models, the macro level models that we learned from CE 321, right? So these things actually come from how users interact with each other. So this is what we're going to learn during week 4, is that how the assumptions that you make between interaction between individual vehicles then translate into different macro level flow density models. Okay? And all of that has to make sense. All of that has to make sense for us to be able to do micro level simulation, because if it doesn't validate into the right picture at the macro level, then maybe we are doing something wrong. And that's where basically the whole idea of calibration and validation comes, right? So that's something that you're going to learn. And then we'll have our midterm that's going to cover all these topics, right? And then we're going to have, after the midterm, we'll talk about traffic signal timing characteristics and modeling of the signal operation using vSim. And in this class, we'll typically use PTV vSim as our software that we're going to learn about. So traffic signal timing and modeling the signal operation will be week 6. And then we'll talk about some macro level modeling of queuing theory and shockwave models to estimate the delays. And then we'll learn about what we call sort of like a 2-fluid model. So this will be a modeling exercise. So if you think about, what we're going to learn about in week 4 and these shockwave models, they're going to be dealing with what we call uninterrupted flow. Right? So they're going to be what we call the uninterrupted flow, the kind of flow that we'll expect on freeways. Okay. And then we'll get to the point where we get to the 2-fluid model. And this is where we're talking about urban street network. Okay. So we are going to be talking about, here we're going to talk about interrupted flow, where there is going to be signals, there is going to be stop signs, where the traffic is expected to stop for pedestrians, for bicyclists crossing, for all sorts of things that might happen on the urban street environment, right? So we're going to learn to model the interrupted flow using the 2-fluid model, and then we'll do a review and midterm 2 in week 10. So what we'll do is we'll spend Tuesday of week 5 and week 10 to review the respective material for the midterm, and then we'll have the test on the Thursday. That sort of is going to be the plan. And then the featured software will be PTV vSim that we're going to use. It's a very capable microscopic level modeling software package. I've been asked this question, do we use Synchro in this class? We don't necessarily use Synchro or SimTraffic in this class, although that's a simulation software that you'll encounter sometimes in practice. So we covered part of that in CE 421. That's one piece. And you don't cover that in CE 421? Okay, maybe we should. So yeah, I haven't taught that class in a while also, but maybe that's part of it. that we need to cover. And then, but we can probably talk about synchro and sim traffic also a little bit in the class, but that's not going to be the focus of this work, partly because synchro and sim traffic is a package that you can, it's a tool that you can learn quite a bit on your own in some ways. And it's not like vSim you cannot learn, but because vSim is much more of a versatile package, so it can do a lot more things. So having some grounding in theory basically can help us learn vSim better. And that's why we focus more on vSim. There's a lot less behavioral aspects that are captured using PTV, using synchro and sim traffic that you are able to capture using vSim. So that's why we are going to just focus mostly on PTV vSim. And we'll try to even talk about a little bit about trying to bring in the package from, like, say, PTV, how to bring a model that's right now is in synchro and sim traffic, how to import that into vSim. So we'll talk a little bit about that, because then you can do a lot more things once you have a vSim model in place. So we'll talk briefly about that. Yes, you had a question. Yes. Yeah, so I think vSim, there is a package that's available, the student version, I think, for download for free, but we'll definitely have a package for you in 13.113 lab. So we'll be able to use that for the most part. I think PTV vSim used to have at least a package that you could download from your own, but I think there might also be a way to do a remote access to the PTV vSim package. So the question was about whether you should download that package. I'll hold off on that yet because we're not there yet. So maybe around, I'm going to say about week 3 is when we're going to probably start to use vSim a little bit more extensively. So wait a couple of weeks, but I'll make sure that it's available to you whenever you're there. Okay. Any other questions about anything in the class? Okay. If no more questions, always remind me to make sure that I'm recording the class. If you can, please. And then we're going to do the same thing for the lab. Although in the lab, we're not going to always lecture, so there's not going to be as much recording there. But we'll still try to see if we can record things and make sure that we have that in place. Now, one thing I also want to say is in today's lab, we'll have a guest speaker. He's a former Cal Poly grad, and his name is Keith. And Keith will be here and talk about a very, very interesting job opportunity that he has. He works for the Shasta County Transportation Authority. It's a local metropolitan planning organization in Northern California. And they're looking for sort of engineer/planner. And he wanted to talk, and I think you might have seen that email going out in the ITE posting, but make sure that you take a look at that because, and then he's going to talk about why that posting, even though it says planner, might be of interest to engineers as well. So something to keep in mind. So he'll be here virtually, of course, via Zoom in our lab today. So make sure that you're there on time and you have a chance to at least interact with him a little bit via Zoom. Okay, and then we'll also do some introductory lecturing, and then we'll have sort of our lab 0 assignment also that we work on in the lab today. Okay, and Thursday is a holiday, I believe, so no class on Thursday. And I'll see you in the lab today, but then I'll see you next week. Okay, thanks a lot, folks. I will see you in the lab.